Welcome back, everybody. My name's Andrew and you're watching the Kelley's Country Life. So I have been building our pole barn house. There's a whole series on the channel if you're interested in that, but something that's been really concerning me is OSB and weather. With me building this house by myself, it's a very slow process. I'm getting to the point that I'm ready to start sheathing it in, and I'm worried about OSB exposure. How long can it be out? I've been reading up the exposure ratings that you see on there. It has an exposure rating 1, and it just vaguely says can handle some exposure to inclement weather during the building process. If you get to reading on it, it doesn't say how much water, what it can handle. So it just leaves me really wondering and worrying, how much exposure can my OSB handle if I start on a wall and maybe it's days and days and days before I can finish, because we've been getting rain left and right. So I've decided to do a little test. I've already started it a couple of days ago with a couple pieces, and I decided to go all the way to the extremes. We're gonna let this test run for several days, check it out, give you the results, and maybe it'll help you make your mind up in the future on a project that you're doing if OSB can actually handle some exposure. So check this out. So I have cut squares of OSB, 3 of them the same size, and this one right here has actually been out here for about 2 to 3 days, and it's been through 2 to 3 rains already. I thought this would probably be the best piece for this test. I'm leaving a cut edge up, which is probably worst case scenario. Here's the painted edge from the factory, and I'm just leaving it on like if it was attached to the house. Rain has been hitting this. So far so good. After 2 days, I don't see the edges really delaminating or expanding, and this is going to be a good test to do right now because they're calling for 80% chance of rain every single day this week. So we're going to let this go many days and kind of see what really happens. Now, as far as worst case scenario, I took another piece of the same size, filled a bucket full of water, and stuck this in there. Nobody's going to leave OSB completely submerged, but let's take it from one extreme to the other. One thing I'm noticing is bubbles coming up everywhere off of this stuff. So this test just started today. I have a feeling this is going to fall completely apart because this is not what is considered an exposure. This is just straight up neglecting it. So we'll leave those pieces there, keep monitoring them day after day. I have one more piece down here. Now I put 10 up for erosion control because we keep having water run off until I can get gutters put up, and it's beating my dirt away. So I just took some old scrap tin stuck out there to keep from washing away from the slab. But this tin always, and I mean always, catches rain. If it rains at all, it's going to fall right here. So I've had this piece out for about 3 days as well. It actually got washed off in the dirt, stayed in the wet dirt. It's getting much more rain exposure than the piece that's on the back wall. So this is kind of a middle ground piece for what we're doing. Still has the dirt on it. So far, maybe that end looks a little swollen, but nothing's chipping, delaminating after about 3 days out here in the rain. So I'm just leaving it on the tin, which fills up with water and flows off this end every time we get rain. So it's just a fun little test, something to help ease my mind and answer questions. Well, it may not ease my mind. This stuff may fall apart and worry me to death. And it kind of gives me an idea of how much exposure this stuff can really handle before I need to jump on covering it up with some sort of Tyvek. So we'll see you back in a day or two. Pretty much every time we get a good rain, we'll come out and check it. I'll let this test go over many days, and that should be a sufficient amount of time for most of us to install this and then get it house wrapped. All right, so I did want to show y'all, we just had a heck of a rain come through. There's going to be a lot more of them. Actually, this is our 2nd or 3rd rain for the day. That is soaking wet. Of course, that's still soaking wet. And it's still actually raining right now. So this piece down here, soaking wet, water's still bouncing off, splashing on it. The water was flowing here a minute ago. You can see the ditch that it was cutting. So we'll keep watching this over the next few days. It is now next morning. We wound up with several rains yesterday, I think 3 total. You can still see we're damp, we're wet, the ground is soaked. So let's check. Here's the one that's been exposed to the weather, been rained on probably 5 or 6 times. I will say the edge does look a little swollen, the cut edge. It's not flaking off, not coming apart. You can see that side. And if you look right there, it does look like it did absorb some moisture and swell on the edges. And actually, if you look up OSB exposure rating online, they'll talk about that's perfectly normal. I personally don't like it, but they say edges will potentially swell and flake, but this is rated for inclement weather and exposure delays, building delays, etc. So, you tell me what you think. The product feels solid. Nothing's coming apart. But I do see a little bit of a swollen edge right there. Overall, this is actually a little better than I was thinking. And this done went through probably 6 rains and been out here for several days. So we'll put that back to get more exposure. Now this one, been completely soaking in this bucket. Let's see here. Yes, we already have delamination failures. Check that out. It's starting to flake off, but I mean, I think we would kind of expect that, right? Fully soaked in there. The product still feels solid, but the edges, yes, they're coming apart. Not good. I would already call that failed. I would not be happy to have that on my house. Now let's check this one. This one got a lot more rain yesterday. You can see we're still dripping off the tin here. This was exposed to even more rain because it washes down than the one on the side of the house. So it is still absolutely soaking wet, but is not coming apart like the one in the bucket. I would say the edges are slightly swollen, possibly to the eye. Very hard to tell. Tiny little flake, that looks like a normal flake. Overall, doesn't feel like it's coming apart. I don't see it truly delaminating. The glue looks like it's still holding. So we'll leave this one out here in a lot more weather. You can see it's soaked almost all the way through. This has seen a lot of rain. All right, so far I'm kind of impressed with the one that's sitting on the side of the house. To have went through many rains as it has, several inches of rain, been out here for days. It's not falling apart as quick as I thought that it would. Calling for a ton more rain today and the rest of the week, so every time we get a good rain, we'll kind of come out and check it at least once a day, and we'll see what it looks like after a week or two. Any longer than that, I don't think I'd want it in the weather. No matter how good it looks, you're just asking for trouble in my mind. But so far so good. All right, let's do a quick check on these pieces. These pieces right here have been out here about 6 days now and went through several inches of rain. I didn't even get a chance to check them yesterday, but rained again yesterday, 3 different times the day before. It's rained every single day this week. And looking at the radar, looks like we have more on the way. The other good thing about this test is we're in Florida and this is July. So this stuff is baking in the sun and then getting wet. It's just going through 2 extremes. So I'll admit, this is holding up a whole lot better than I realized. Still feels nice and solid. I don't see it really flaking or falling apart. The end still looks maybe just a little swollen, but not as bad as I was thinking. The cut edges, surprisingly, where I thought it would have an issue, those look even better. So far so good. I will admit OSB is holding up to multiple rains and many days out here far better than I thought that it would. It's making me feel confident enough. I may go ahead and start sheathing next week. At that point, this stuff will have been out here about 10 days by then. That'll give me a good idea what to expect. Now this nasty looking bucket that's full of water down here, this piece, yeah, it started delaminating. It's been in this bucket for probably a good 36 or more hours, completely soaked. As you can see, the factory edge is coming apart. The cut edges, although swollen, aren't coming apart as bad as I thought, but it's the factory edge where we're seeing issues on all of these. I think that cut edge is kind of sealing it and polishing it. So this here is kind of our medium test piece. It gets more rain than the one that's on the side of the house, but a lot less obviously than what's in the bucket. So far, halfway good. It's definitely a little swollen on the factory edge, and cut edges are even showing some swelling. Yeah, right there. Now this one stays in a lot of water. There's a tremendous amount that runs down this tin. As you can see, it washes the yard out constantly. So on the side of the house, like it would normally be, okay. Anywhere else, like laying on the ground where it's constantly getting wet, or obviously completely submerged in the bucket, which nobody's gonna do, it'll have a problem after a few days. All right, so I think today is gonna be the final day of testing this OSB. It's been out in the weather for 10 days, if I remember correctly. I haven't checked it the last couple of days. We have actually had some very hot and sunny days with a few showers in between. But overall, several inches of rain has dumped on this OSB, and I think I've got the results that I really didn't know I was looking for. So here is the piece that's been out catching water a lot as it falls off the side of the house and runs down this trough that I made here. And as you can tell, very little delamination, I'll call it, of the glue in there. The edges look okay. I'm starting to see some separation there. I really don't want my OSB doing that, but this was kind of a almost worst case scenario, catching a lot of water and laying in some of the water that stayed on top of that tin. Overall, that is still a solid piece of wood. Corners are not flaking. I like it. Now back here, as far as the true worst case scenario, oh, that water looks disgusting. This has been completely submerged for days. This piece completely delaminated and looks really bad. There's no way I would want that on the side of my house, but this was beyond worst case scenario. Nobody's gonna keep wood absolutely submerged. And here's the test piece that I am most curious about. It's been on the side of the house, like I said, for almost a week and a half through several inches of rain. I am still very, very pleased with what I'm seeing. So no doubt the exposure rating 1 that this has been given, that it can take some inclement weather and delays in construction, they were right. I thought this would be in much worse shape with the extreme heat that it's been. And oh my goodness, I've lost count of how many showers, including some that were up to an inch. This looks really good. So the factory edge is the only little bit of a tiny swollen edge. Nothing's coming apart. Everything is nice and solid here. No delamination that I'm seeing. Cut edges look excellent. So what does this mean? So with that said, I've always heard horror stories of OSB. You hear the stories of basically if it touches water, it'll just come apart on you. That does not seem to be the case. I'm going to go ahead and start sheathing tomorrow on this house build. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like to see me build this house right here, because now I feel confident and comfortable that should I get caught in a little bit of rain with the OSB, it looks like it's going to be perfectly fine, especially if I can protect the edges at all. But other than that, it looks like it can handle multiple rains and still be okay. Now I prefer for it to not make it through a single rain, but the old wives' tales and horror stories that I've heard just doesn't seem to be the case, especially with the one that laid down there in the tin and caught tremendous amounts of rain. Still looks relatively okay. Not quite where I want it to be, but the one on the side of the house, which is exactly how the OSB will be, I think it's perfectly fine. I may run this test again. I'm going to buy some more plywood here coming up in a few weeks, and we may do a side-by-side comparison of plywood and OSB, because believe it or not, I've had some scrap plywood get wet, and it seems like it delaminates and separates worse than the OSB has. Sounds like a good test. Hopefully you enjoyed this little video. We'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.